Hey everyone, welcome to Founders 365 with me, Steven Haggerty. Today I'm joined by the co-founder and CEO of Lingua, Mr. Ray Blakney. How are you today, Ray?
Steven, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, even more better for having you on the show. So thank you so much for your time. I said the name right, so that's a great start.
How about we just end it here? I mean, we can't. This is the top. We can't go up from here anymore, right?
It's not Live Lingua, it's Live Lingua.
Live Lingua, you got it.
There we go. So I guess the best way to start this podcast, just like many of them are, is if you can give an overview of what Live Lingua is, what you guys do, who you serve, and then we can get into the story and who you are and all that good juicy stuff.
Sounds good. So Live Lingua, we are one of the top 3 online language schools in the world, but we're the only one that was started with no VC backing. Our 2 biggest competitors have $10 and $20 million in VC backing respectively, and we started for $60, which is how much it costs to get 1 year of hosting on Bluehost with the domain name. But we had the early mover advantage. We started about 12 years ago. When I say co-founder, my other co-founder is my wife. So, we did what everybody says don't do, and started a business together, but now we've been happily married for 12 years, and we have a pretty successful location-independent business that we're running, and we can run from anywhere. So what we do at Live Lingua is we're more boutique. A lot of our competitors are these directories where like anybody can go up and sign up to be a teacher, right? They would let me in there as an English teacher. I have no business teaching anybody English. I mean, my grammar is awful, but they would let me sign up. So what we did was we went the more boutique route. And we kind of have this thing where you have to go through 3 months training and you have to have a college degree in language education to even work with us. We have fewer teachers, but we work with more, I would say we're a little more expensive, but we work with like clientele that's a little higher up, and our teachers are of a higher quality. But we still have thousands of students taking classes with us every single month. We have hundreds of teachers who take classes with us, and we try to run it like a brick and mortar language school, which is how we started, which we'll get to that like in the next part of our story. So we started brick and mortar, we moved online, and since we're bootstrapping it, luckily we don't have to pay back $20 million in VC money, right? Or impress investors. So we're all about growing kind of slowly, keeping the quality up there, but we don't have to grow 20% month on month just to keep the VC people happy.
Oh, I love it. So, I mean, you brought it up. Let's go back in time. What was going on in your world when you looked at your wife and said, hey, let's start this business together and see what we can do with it? Like you said, not many people are brave enough to do that.
Actually, we were dating when that started. We got engaged like a month
even
later.
Better. So, that's like
worse.
Was it third date, fourth date? Hey, let's start a business together.
Well, that's it. No, that's my parents. They got married after 6 weeks of meeting each other. I found out, and that was actually a huge surprise. We've been dating for 2 years, luckily. So I was in an organization called the Peace Corps. I quit my job, almost a 6-figure job as a computer engineer in the United States. I wanted something more out of my life, and I joined the U.S. Peace Corps, which paid me $150 a month to volunteer in southern Mexico with the indigenous communities. I met my wife there, not in the indigenous communities, but she was one of the Peace Corps staff whose job it was to teach all these Americans who showed up in Mexico to volunteer Spanish, and that's kind of how we met and started dating. At the end of it, they give you $2,000 to buy a plane ticket back to the United States and maybe pay your down payment on the rent for your first month. And at that point, my wife and I looked at my girlfriend at the time, and I think we were already engaged, so my fiance at the time, and we kind of looked at each other. It's like, hey, why don't we just start a business now, right? We're young, we're married, we're luckily, our parents are still here, and they could take us in for 3 months if we're not. You're a bilingual teacher, I'm a computer engineer, we'll find a job. I mean, worst case scenario, we'll get work somewhere, and we'll be okay. So we launched a brick and mortar language school because for some reason it didn't even occur to me, being a computer engineer, that launching online was the way to go. I'm like, let's do a traditional business.
You had all these computers around you, and you just went, nah, that's not the future.
Of course not. That's yesterday. This was like 2006, right? Those days are over. So we launched a brick and mortar language school, and it was actually very successful. So it was fully booked. I learned at that time something called SEO, search engine optimization. This was back 2008.
Back in the good days of SEO.
Back in the days where you hit a software and it pretty much built links for you. I'm like, exactly. I miss those days.
Well, you spend hours clicking your own link to get it up Google.
That's it. Get that bounce rate down. Let's go in there and all the rest of it. And luckily, no other language school in Mexico had a full-time SEO on their staff except us. So before we even launched, our brick and mortar language school was #1 in Mexico. And people even today still believe that if it's #1 in Google, it's the best, right? Somehow that means it's the best. No, it just means that they got better SEOs. And their product could be crap.
Just means you got a smarter guy behind the scenes.
That's it. And so we launched. We were fully booked in the beginning with $2,000. We launched. we didn't have money for furniture in the first business. So what we would do is people would pay their deposit. We would run out the day before, buy like tables for the classrooms. And we would actually move tables to different classrooms. So it looked like our school was bigger and during lunch breaks. So the students would be in different classrooms.
How many rooms are we talking here? What
like
sort of
5
building
rooms.
did you get?
It was like
that's
a 5
pretty big
room.
though.
It was not. It was an old historic, building in the downtown in Mexico in this historic city. Kind of, if you've ever been to like, Spain, it kind of looked a little like that. So we had this old house. We wanted to kind of give the traditional experience, and it worked. And we ended up having 3 chains of three branches of that school, which was successful. But then swine flu hit Mexico, and we're recording this, Steven, during anybody watching this in the future during COVID, so it's kind of appropriate. And suddenly, our students were people coming from other countries to come and study with us at our schools. So students dried up, right? Swine flu was supposed to be the global pandemic. They closed off the country. That was when Live Lingua was born. So my wife actually had the idea, why don't we reach out to our old students and give them classes on Skype? Because our teachers work week to week, contractors, and like most people, they don't budget. So, if they didn't have work next week, they didn't have food, they didn't have rent. So it was our responsibility to find them work. So I'm like, okay, I'll make a website for that. We'll offer it to our old students, but why don't I just throw up a website and see if anybody else wants to do this kind of thing, right? So I threw up this ugly website. I'm a programmer, not a designer, so it was awful.
So pure, all it was is literally HTML code.
That's HTML was just text, like with an image at the top or something like that with a little contact form.
I miss those kind of websites.
I know, it was so easy to make. It was good old days. Nowadays, I have programmers working for me, and I don't even understand half the stuff they're doing.
Yeah, my very first business was website and graphic design, and I would be coding all night. And then you always had that like one hyphen or comma that screwed you over for 2-3 hours.
Off by a pixel, and you're like, it just won't move. And then somebody opens it up in Internet Explorer, and then the whole page.
Don't even get started. Then then Firefox got popular, and it's just no.
It was rough. I mean, it was bad. And this was then cell phones back then.
No drag and drop back then.
No drag and drop and no bootstrap for like getting the websites to rearrange themselves for the cell phone, right? So that was our first business. I launched it up there. To our surprise, 2 things happened. First, COVID passed in a month. I mean, not COVID, excuse me. Swine flu. Yeah, passed in a month. And our school was fully booked again 30 days later. But within 6 months, we were making more money and working 30 minutes a day on this online language school, which back then was called Spanish-lessons-online.com. Because back in the day, that actually worked. And we were like number 1 across the board because nobody else was doing it, or very few people were doing it in the world. So we decided to sell our brick and mortar school, and we went all in on the online school. Back then, we had 11 microsites at that point. So, onlineenglishLessons.net and all these kind of websites. Then Google Penguin came around and killed them. Like overnight, they were gone. Nowhere on the rankings.
One of those situations where you woke up and your business
traffic went to 0.
Wow.
Luckily, the way our business model works, where students kind of stay with us, our income didn't just go boom, right? Mm-hmm. Because we have students who just kind of stick around, and we have a churn rate like any other online business, but the churn rate's about 5 to 6%. So I'm like, okay, we have a runway of about 1 to 2 years. We were living way below. We live in Mexico, so you make $2,000 a month. You're middle upper class here. We could survive for quite a bit on what we were making at the time. So we rebranded as Live Lingua. We owned the domain before, but there was nothing on it. I was just using it like for my billing. All the other websites were owned by livelingua.com, but there was there was nothing on that page. So
people still do that now.
They do, of course. I mean, it's like, so what I did was like, okay, you guys have been paying to Live Lingua all this time anyway. Now we've merged onto one site. We didn't tell them Google messed us up. We just we've merged all our website into one site.
I started with proper professional,
That they don't need to know these things. What's going on behind? Ignore the man behind the curtain, kind of thing. That was what's going on. So I rebuilt the site from scratch myself. And this time we did everything like white hat. We were like gray hat SEO back then because you needed to be to compete.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't compete being white hat back in the day because everybody would just blow you out of the water with the automated softwares. And we built it back up. Within 3 years, we were back to where we were before. Within 5 years, we were way past it. We won Entrepreneur Magazine, Best Small Business in the U.S. back in 2016, I believe. We've been featured in Forbes. We've been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine twice since then, Boston Globe and a few others, kind of national. Hemisphere Magazine, the United Airways magazine. We were the feature story for, back in 2017. So for the whole month.
That's the pinnacle one.
Exactly. For a whole month, everybody was stuck on a plane and had to read about us. There was no choice. This was the only thing you had. And these are national flights in the U.S., so you don't even get a TV and movies on those. You have to read the magazine.
Just read your story.
That's pretty much. Me and my wife were there. Kind of our photos were there. All the rest of it. I've got a copy of it sitting around here somewhere. Yeah. And that's how we built our business up to what it is today. And it's been a gradual growth year over year. It's not, 60-day launch for millions of dollars. No, if I wrote a book on business, it'd be the boring how to build a 7-figure business in 7 years. And
which is actually the legit the thing is that's like the real way to do it, isn't it?
That's how most people do it.
That's how most people do it. But also that's how most people do it who survive longer than a year. Mm-hmm. Because most of the companies that you see now, or people that you see now that sort of, let's say, brag about that, in 12 months time, 18 months time, they're doing something completely different, different focus, whatever it is. And it's so good to see that you've just had that consistency with what you wanted to do. Where does that motivation come from? Where does that consistency come from? Because like you said, it's a successful business. Where you live, you're not having to spend a fortune to live, so cash flow is probably quite good. You must be tempted every now and then to go, oh, actually, I'm gonna go and do this other thing now because we've learned all this stuff.
Absolutely, and I do. So, I'm launching 2 new businesses in January, one by accident. The other one was planned, but one of them was kind of an accident that I'm launching it in January. But the key there is, because I went through a phase. It's a great question. So I went through a phase when the business was first successful, right before Google Penguin killed us, right? So there were about 3 or 4 years in there where we were low to mid 6 figures across the pages, as you say, and we had 2 Filipino VAs as staffs, where overhead was like $1,000 a month, and everything else was like profit. And so we're like, oh, this is great,
living the good life.
Exactly. So I started resting on my laurels. Luckily, and I just tried all these other business ideas. The upside and downside, Steven, you'll know it, being a computer person, is we can launch a business whenever we feel like it.
Yeah.
Which sounds great, but it's also bad when you have business ideas
especially
all the time.
Now if you add into the mix now, like we said before, we now have Shopify. We now overnight we can have a store that's probably better than most stores were 5 years ago.
Awful for focus. It's awful for focus, right? Because I'm like, I could do that. And then next week I'm like, oh, I should do that. So I spent 2 years doing that. Every 3 to 6 months. This was pre-Shopify. WordPress was around, but I'm still not a huge fan of WordPress because it's great for people who are starting off, but if you're a programmer, it just limits you too much, right? You're like, it doesn't do exactly what I want it to do. So it kind of gives me some issues. But I did that. None of those businesses work. On pure luck that Lingua and our brick and mortar schools didn't go down in that time. They didn't go up either. They just kind of floated to where they were until Google Penguin hit. And then suddenly I'm like, I cannot be focusing on anything else. I need to be focusing on this business.
So that made you sort of wake up and go, I need to come back to earth, focus on this thing.
It's my biggest business regret to date. Wow. So, right now we compete with the top 3, so we're doing pretty well. If I had focused only on Lingua for those first 3 years, I think we'd be blowing the top 3 out of the water right now. Because we were, this was way before these top 3, the other 2 at the top hadn't even launched. Did not exist for like 5 years. We would have had a 5-year runway to blow them out of the water, and we didn't take advantage of it. My lack of experience. My background's not business. I don't come from a family of business people. I come from a family of like professors and academics and all the rest of it. So I had no idea what I was doing. Just looking
at things in a different way.
That's it. So I was just like, okay, yeah, let's go and do all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until about 3 or 4 years ago that I did start launching other businesses. I owned a chocolate factory in Southeast Asia for a few years, sold my stock in that 2 years ago, something like that. It's successful. It's just not successful enough to warrant as much time as it was taking.
I mean, unlimited chocolate, there's no downside to that.
I don't like chocolate, but my wife does. So whenever we argue, I could just call up my operating partner and I'm like, hey, send over a crate. I really messed up this time. So just send over a year's supply. Luckily, we're still on good terms. It wasn't because we had a partnership.
You still get the supply when you mess up.
I can still email her or call her anytime I want, and I'm sure she'll send over a huge buck. We visit every time we're back in the Philippines. But the way I was able to do that is at that time, I already had a good team running the day-to-day operations, and they're still there at Lingua. I'm really happy that most of our staff have been with us for years. In the last 5 years, I can only think of one person who's quit.
Wow. That's impressive.
And she quit not because she loved the job, but she was working for us as she traveled around the world. We're a location independent business. So she was our customer support person, and she was traveling around South America, right? But the issue is, then she decided, she was younger. She's like, I need to move back to the US. I'm 26. I should start a career and all the rest of it. And our salary simply wasn't high enough. I mean, it's great for somebody who wants to be backpacking around the world. It's a great salary for that, but it just wasn't enough for them to do that. So she's like, oh, unfortunately, I have to, I'm leaving. And she gave us like 3 months notice to help us train the person. That's the only person who's ever left our core team in all these years that have worked for us.
They run the business. Merit in itself.
Yeah. I mean, we're a small team, keep in mind. I mean, we're relatively big business, but our core team is only 9 people that run the entire business. We have contractors and teachers that are hundreds, right? But our core team is only 9 people, and most of us.
You say only, but what was it? It's Kylie Jenner. Her business is only hires 7 people or something crazy like that.
That's it. I mean, and that's a lot of the business.
Big teams are just not needed anymore.
It depends on what you want out of your business, right? If you want to build the next Facebook, sure, you need it, but
get some developers on board.
That's exactly it. But if your goal in life is to, let's say, make $1 million a year, just as an arbitrary thing, right? You can probably do that with a $3 to $4 million business. Not easy, but you don't need a $50 billion. Yeah, exactly. It's not a NASDAQ listed business, right? Yeah. You can do that, and that might be big enough. Most people don't even need that much, right? If I said you need a business that makes you $10,000 a month, that's $500,000.
That's plenty for most people.
I mean, that puts you in the 1%. The top.
But it is that shiny object, though, isn't it? That figure is the shiny object that everyone tries to go for.
But when you get there, trust me, from experience, you will not feel. It's like, oh, I remember when we launched the first school. I live in Mexico. Yeah, I'm like $3,000, and we'll be cruising. Yeah. You make $3,000. I'm like $4,000 sounds good. 5,000.
10, 20.
At 10, 50. I will never need money again. And 20,000, you're like, yeah, we'll be living like kings. And then you get there, and you're like, yeah, it's really not. And then you kind of just keep going up.
And then you realize, oh, actually, money shouldn't be the motivator.
That's exactly it. Now there is that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's that minimum amount that everybody needs: rent, food, all that kind of stuff like that. After that, and for some people, I don't think it's $70,000. They did a math in the US, it's $70,000. Some people, it might be 120, might be 180, but I doubt there are very many people who pass 200,000. It makes very much of a difference. Yeah. At that point, you have to kind of question your life choices. I think, if you're buying Maseratis every day, yeah, maybe there's something else behind that that's motivating you to do that. That's not what making you happy. I mean, great, buy a fancy car. My wife and I, as a luxury, we rented a Ferrari for a day and Tuscany when we were in Italy.
Took all the Instagram photos possible.
That's it. Drove it around, but you're kind of scared when you're driving it around because don't.
Yeah, you're unsure, especially if you rented, even better. Track
it. But that was a $10,000 deductible. I'm like, if I ding this thing, I'm like, yeah, they're gonna. It's Italy. They're gonna take that. Yeah, they're just gonna take the $10,000 for that little.
And I used to live in France, so I know Italian drivers that you want to be careful.
Exactly. No, it was even though I think people were careful when you're driving a Ferrari around, they actually make room because they don't want to be the one to ding you either. Yeah. So they kind of just drive around there. They didn't know it wasn't my car, so it was all good.
Again, need to know basis.
Exactly, but that's otherwise I drive a Hyundai. I mean, my regular car here is a Hyundai. I don't have a fancy car. I mean, it's not that important to me.
One thing I wanted to ask you, one of the top 3. Like you said earlier, the other 2 main competitors, 10, 20 million VC funding, you must have had knocks on the door. You must have had conversations. You must have had that conversation, especially with, your co-founder and wife, in terms of like, shall we go down that path? And I guess the question is, 1, why didn't you? And 2, if you could do it all again, would you?
Absolutely not. Starting with the second question.
Second one, nice.
I'm launching, I've launched multiple new businesses, never going down the VC route. Generally speaking, because starting a business, in my opinion, is stressful enough as is. I love it. I plan on doing it for years and years and years. But it's stressful enough without having somebody breathing down your back saying, hey, have you grown 20% this month? Hey, have you grown 20% this month?
How's that churn rate going?
Exactly. Have you reduced that? No. I think that I'd have a lot more gray hair than I do. Which, actually, I don't have any. None. So, exactly.
It's either really good camera lighting or you have none.
Exactly. So, it's because I want to reduce the stress. It goes back exactly to what we were talking about before. It's about what makes you happy in life. We're making more than we need in our business right now. I don't need to grow 20. We're growing about 20% a year. Not 20% a month, but 20% a year. Hey, I'm happy with that. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm not retired. I don't need to retire in 5 years and, put it all away. I mean, I can wait another 10, 20 years to retire if I need to. If we keep growing 20% for 20 years, we're good.
What's your opinion on people that do chase that, though? Because the way I look at it, especially in the last probably 2-3 years, is funding, investment rounds. It's almost become the trendy thing to do. And some people that I see go through it, in my view, it's kind of it's almost the lazy way out, because you skip a lot of that time. Obviously, let's talk about you. You spent years making the business, years growing it. VC funding, or any funding, put it external funding, is sort of like that pill that speeds things up. what's your view on it then? What's your view in terms of what you've seen in the market in the past couple of years and people doing that?
Absolutely, Steven. I mean, I even touch upon this point. The thing about bootstrapping, which is my specialty, I bootstrap business. All my businesses have been bootstrapped. Even
that's the fun bit.
It is the fun part. Even when I'm launching, for example, Podcast Talk, we talked about earlier. That's when I'm launching a podcast SaaS company for podcast booking in January. I'm not taking money out of Live Lingua to do that. I am bootstrapping that as well. I wrote the MVP myself. So until it's proven, I like what's the name? The founder of LinkedIn. I think it's the founder of Twitter who says if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you waited too long to launch. Yeah. I live by that. So I'm launching this, thing that it's going to work, but it was not going to look pretty in January that I pretty much built myself. If people start paying for it, then I'll start hiring staff. Mm-hmm. The reason I like the bootstrapping methodology is when you have money, it's easy to either cover up or ignore problems by throwing money at it, right? Our funnel doesn't work. Let's throw more money at it, and eventually we'll start getting clients from it.
More money into ad spend, it will turn.
That's it. We'll get the visits. The investor can be happy because our sign-up rate goes up, even though the customers are awful.
3 years running at a massive loss. Hey, who cares?
That's it. And that's what the big money allows you to. If you're bootstrapping, you do not have that luxury. You have to find what works. You have to find it fast, and you have to iterate fast. And that's what I enjoy, and I think that's what makes a long-term, I'm going to call lifestyle business, even though that kind of gets a bad rap, right? Lifestyle business
at the moment,
exactly. They're saying, oh, it's just this hobby somebody's doing.
You mean you're not sat on a beach right now on a laptop?
No, but I could be. I mean, it's the kind of business.
Although actually, if you've ever sat on a beach with a laptop trying to do work, the screen glare from the sun.
Oh, it's awful.
You can't see anything anywhere. Whenever I see
100% humidity all the time. I mean, we go to the beach, we enjoy it, but I'm like, I don't know.
Or like when you see people in the jacuzzi doing work. In my head, I'm like, why are you working in a jacuzzi? Just be in a jacuzzi and enjoy it.
And plus, if you're there for like an hour and it's too hot, I think they're just going to pass out on their laptop, right?
Most places have a 15-minute time limit.
That's it. We went to an onsen in Japan, and they're like, they let us, would you like it for 15 minutes or 30 minutes? And my wife and I, reserved it for 30. I'm like, 15 doesn't sound like much. 10 minutes. 10 minutes we were sitting there like, we got to get out. It's just so hot.
Come out like a lobster.
Exactly. We had no idea what we were doing. But, imagine working in there for 8 hours. Physically impossible. But you're exactly right. So that's, I think, a lot of the issue with the VC money is you don't learn your business as well when you're doing it. You have, again, that person breathing down your neck. It's stressful enough when you have clients that are having trouble, right? But then you have somebody pushing and pulling you on both ends. Yes, some people, and the ones you read about and see in the movies, that's how they kind of get up to those big exits, and they're driving Ferraris every single day and all the rest of it. But most businesses, I don't believe, are started that way. In fact, I don't have the statistics, Steven. You probably know them better than I do. But what percentage of VC-funded companies survive? Very, very low amount, right? That's why they're looking for 20x. If an investor
invests in 10 businesses, maybe two at lucky, sort of makes decent money. They kind of
and unicorn is even more rare, right? I mean, if you're looking for 100 million, that's way out there, right?
And again, you look at some of these businesses that have had hundreds of millions pumped into them, and they are running at a massive loss. And actually,
has Twitter ever made money? I don't think so.
Well, exactly. Should Twitter ever make money? But you look at obviously like WeWork in recent years, they in crazy sort of format and structure.
Their numbers too, right? Yeah,
they I mean, that was a massive controversy, but it kind of just breeds this interesting entrepreneur though in terms of why people do what they do. I love the fact that you're like pure bootstrap, you're just like getting the nitty gritty, because like you said, that is the best way to learn about people's or companies' problems that you can build that solution for. And that is the basics and foundation of any business.
Absolutely. I don't hire people to do jobs that I've never done, ever. I mean, in my first business, I would take out the trash and sweep the floors with my wife. So when we hired the cleaning lady, I knew whether she was doing the good job or not.
I bet she loved you working over her shoulder.
Oh, yeah. Luckily, I've been learning over time, because back then I probably was a micromanager. I didn't know any better, but I've been learning to let go. It's been a work in progress. But, I've done Facebook ads. I've done Google ads. I've done development. I've done customer support. I mean, I did all the emails for Live Lingua for the first 4 years.
Wow.
So you can't come to me and say, hey, I've done tens of thousands of email inquiries myself into my businesses. And now that I'm launching Podcast Talk and my e-commerce store for smart toilets in January, I'm going to be doing all the customer support for at least the first 3 to 6 months until that makes enough money for me to hire somebody, which means I'm going to learn exactly what people are asking for on day one. It's not going to be a problem I can ignore. I can't throw money at it, hire somebody to make it go away. I have to deal with it myself.
Well, it's like, I don't, do you have it in Mexico, Deliveroo? Have you heard of it?
Yeah. We use, I don't know, is Delivery a specific app? I mean, we have Uber
Deliveroo,
Eats.
Deliveroo is a specific app.
Okay.
It originally founded here in London. It was sort of an ex-finance guy that used to live in New York, came to the UK. First day in the job in Canary Wharf, he was like, what are we getting for lunch? And they all went down to the supermarket, got a microwave meal. He was like, what? There's all these amazing restaurants and I can't access. Created this food delivery app. But I think once a week or once a month, he will still go out on the app, be a delivery driver, because he wants to see, like you said, exactly how people are interacting with the brand, how people are interacting with the app, what's working, what's not. And it's very refreshing, again, that you have that mindset, but it's also great to see other founders do it, because it's easy to lose touch, isn't it? It's easy to lose touch, especially when you start having a team, start making decent money, all these pinnacles that we have when we first start the business. When we start that, it's so easy to then, I guess, like you said a couple of years ago, you took your foot off the gas a little bit, you kind of got complacent, and you've learned from that moving forward. And I guess my next question, Ray, you kind of mentioned it a minute ago, which I was not expecting, but what is next for you? Smart toilets, what are they?
Yeah, so there's definitely that's the accidental business. I'm starting 2 businesses launching in January of 2021.
I actually thought the podcasting one was the accidental one.
No, that one was totally on purpose. So we'll start with howmuchtoiletpaper.com. So I am launching a smart toilet store on that. History of that is howmuchtoiletpaper.com was created by one of your countrymen over there in the UK. He's a student at the, I think, UCL,
University City of London.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So it's a good school. It's a very good school, right?
Yeah, good school.
He was graduating and was about to start a job at Amazon, but apparently, the whole COVID thing started, and he and his friend got together and was like, how much toilet paper do we need? This was the whole hoarding thing. They're like, I don't know. Let's build a calculator online and throw it up there and see if anybody wants it. Went viral. He had 15 million visits to that site in January. From an SEO point of view, he got more backlinks to that site from big sites than it took me 10 years to build in Live Lingua. I mean, I worked 10 years to do it in like 30 days.
You're not bitter about that at all.
Not because I bought it, not anymore. I was before, right? So the issue, BBC, it was mentioned on like the Daily Show, like literally they talked about it and showed it on the screen when they were talking. Look at this silly calculator that people built, right? So there were links from all over the place. I got put in touch with this kid and we were talking. He's like, I'm graduating. I don't really, I don't know what to do with this business. I'm not a business person. I'm graduating. I have a good job at a Fortune 50 company.
He doesn't need
sell
it.
Yeah, he's like, I can't build a business on this. So I'm like, okay, I'll give you this amount for it. It wasn't a huge amount. I mean, cheap car amount, kind of thing. But I'm like, I couldn't hire an SEO company to build me this many links for that. I mean,
that's a great way to look at it, though, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I did SEO for years as a consultant when I was starting off. Yeah, I mean, getting one of these links would have taken me a month and like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and I was getting it for like $5, right? So I'm like, I will buy that. I don't even know what I'm going to do with it yet. I'm just going to buy this site and I'll figure it out later. So it just sat there for 3 or 4 months. And then a friend of mine made a joke because we'd been in Japan and my wife loved the smart toilets there, right? With all the buttons and all the rest. I'm like, yeah, that sounds, how much toilet paper? We could make that an e-commerce store with smart, smart toilets. Yeah. So we're building that into, I'm working with some people. We're building it into hopefully the go-to place for smart toilet accessories, like smart toilets, smart mirrors. So, you want touchscreen mirrors with lights and TVs and stuff built in there. We're going to have smart toilet paper rolls, all these kind of like smart devices for your bathroom.
Anything smart for your bathroom, we are going to be covering. If it's got a chip in it, it's going on the site.
If it's got a chip in it, and you're going to spend some time sitting there,
and you can program it on your phone. That's
some of the mirrors have Bluetooth. You can like Chromecast your like Netflix to them and watch those while you're shaving or sitting in the shower and stuff like that. So we're launching that in January. We're just working out a few final suppliers, and the website should be done probably by the end of this month. So that's howmuchtoiletpaper.com. The next one, which was the planned business, was a website called podcasthawk.com. I've talked about this before. I don't get too caught up on the names of my businesses. I'm like, podcast and an animal. Which one's exactly? Which one's there? I'm like, podcast wolf. Nope, take it. Podcast shark. Take it.
Namechecker.com.
Yeah, that's it. I'm like, there it is. And Podcast Hawk is there. That's my business name. So I launched it. Podcast Hawk, the story is a little more interesting. So I've had two podcasts in the past. I have a third one right now, but the first two were not very successful. I know how much work it is to make a podcast, even, going into it and kind of producing and getting everything out there. And I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of work, and finding guests and everything. You know what's a lot less work? And I'd been on about 10 or 15 podcasts at the beginning of this year. Not a huge, but this is over like 3 or 4 years. So not a huge amount, but I'd been on some. That's a lot less work. Being on podcasts is a lot less work than actually doing them myself. I don't have to research my guests. I don't have to find my guests. I don't have to produce them. I don't have to release them. I don't have to pay hosting on Libsyn or something like that and all that. I just show up and talk about it, and I get access to somebody else's audience. So I got one of my assistants out there, and I'm like, hey, find me some podcasts to get on. So she spent a whole week, 40 hours, and she came back, and I'm like, I found 30. And I went and looked, and like half of them hadn't created episodes in the last 6 months. So we're totally inactive. And then the other half that were left, their emails weren't working anymore. So, we would email them, they wouldn't work. So I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this, to, get good people connected with great podcasters that are a good fit for them. So I spent a weekend to see if it was possible for me to do it. It was. I didn't finish it in a weekend. I just found out it was possible. So I created a system where now we have every podcast in iTunes and Stitcher in a database. I make it searchable, and by a bunch of criteria. So you can say, hey, I want to be in podcasts on a business category that have at least a 4.5-star rating and have the word, I don't know, pink flamingos in their title because I'm selling pink flamingos. Who cares, right? I mean, but it has that in the title, or has mentioned my competitor once in one of their episodes, because we have every episode in there as well. Hit search, boom, brings back all the results for you. You can go through and pick the results, filter the ones you like. And what you say is, hey, okay, I like it. Let's start a campaign. Create a campaign. And we help you customize the emails, but we take care of all the emailing, the first email, the follow-up 7 days later. And if they reply and say, yeah, we'd like to book you, that gets forwarded automatically into your inbox, and you're set. The idea with Podcast Talk is you can set up between 1 to 10 campaigns, depending on the plan you sign up for. And if you set them up right, it's set and forget. Because even if a new podcast gets released tomorrow that matches your criteria.
It's a bit like Meet Alfred for podcasts.
It's like what?
Meet Alfred. It's like the LinkedIn automation system.
Oh, exactly. I'd forgotten about that company, but it's the Meet Alfred for podcasts.
Yeah, I think it used to be called Meet Hugo, and then they changed it.
Okay.
Who knows why? But what I love about that is it enables guests to be consistent, because what I find is, like I said to you earlier, your episode 208 this year for me. So I've been on that side of about finding guests, keeping the quality as high as possible, getting great conversations on. I think I've done a pretty good job, and we've been very consistent with that. But one of the things I've seen, one of the things I've noticed from the guest side is that they're only doing maybe, a couple a year, or they're only maybe going through a little, too much work. But maybe if they are going to do it, they're going to go through a stint of maybe doing, 8 in a month, but then they stop. And as you know, building your own business or building anything or getting any PR, it's about the consistency. It's about consistently talking, consistently having those conversations, whether they're to do with your business or not. It's kind of irrelevant nowadays as well, because people want to know, and this is why I did this podcast, because people want to know the person behind the business. That's what makes it special.
I've been on travel podcasts. One of the more interesting podcasts I've been on is called Dads Read Princess Stories. So I got sent out like a public domain Filipino version of Cinderella, and I read that out because I have a 10-month-old son. I got to read it out, and that's the whole podcast. I don't even know, I never met the guy. But you're right. It's about getting out there for your brand. Consistency. I mentioned that, the reason they don't do it is hard work. Is what exists out there right now is either do it manually, which is go out, find people. And most entrepreneurs don't have that much time to be just doing that all day. Or you pay. I went and talked to some agencies, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll charge you $3,000 to get you on 5 podcasts. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to pay you $3,000. And we're not talking like, Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss here. I mean, these could be a guy who launched a podcast yesterday. They get me on one of those. And I was like, I'm not going to pay this much. For us, we're charging like, if you pay yearly, it's like $99 a month, and you will get on like 4 to 5 podcasts a month without even thinking
the thing about those agencies, because I get emails probably every day saying, hey, we've got a guest for your podcast. And I've got to say, maybe, let's say in the last week, I've probably had 10 emails, say, from agency types. 1 or 2 of those are guests that I would say are a good fit and have that. And you also know that it's all so automated, but in the unpersonal side, so obviously you can sort of filter your categories and things like this. But when you have
can even
agencies,
personalize your email outreach, because if you're not going to, and we don't take responsibility necessarily for the response you're going to get, because if all you say,
you start the ball rolling.
Yeah, exactly. And you need to customize it for each one, but we have tools in there to make it a lot easier. What we do is help you with the search, and we help you with the outreach. But if you're going to actually do the emails, don't send the same. Random. I get this for like guest posts. I love your blog. Can I do guest posts for it? I'm like,
I love your blog. Insert blog name here.
That's exactly it. If you use our system to do that, you're not getting on podcast. I'm sorry. There's nothing. We're going to make it easier for you. It's not going to work. You're not getting on.
But also, as a host myself, we see through that so easily. So
you get hundreds of those a day.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that you're not enabling that, which is exactly what you're doing. But you're obviously doing that from your experience, which again is why the best businesses are built. They're ones that are built from experience. You've seen the problems that arise. And again, I love the fact you're bootstrapping it. So that's super exciting.
I tested it and I got a 34% response rate. 100 podcast outreach, I got on 34 of them. Any email marketer will tell you that's a pretty decent.
That's good.
But that's because I took the time to personalize the outreach, at least 1 or 2 lines to personalize it within our systems. We give you all the information in the systems. We give the description, what they talk about, the common keywords they use. So you can actually kind of say, okay, this is what this podcast is about, and this is what I can offer your audience that's relevant to your audience. I'm not going to offer you marketing if your podcast is about emotional growth. I mean, it just makes no sense. But we can help you automate that. But it's going to still take work from you for our system, Podcast Hawk, to work well. You have to put in the work. It's not click, send. The system will do it, but you're not going to get any results.
Exactly. It can do it, but you're not going to get the results, and results are matter. But listen, Ray, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I feel like me and you could probably chat for the next 3-4 hours and it'll be quite easy, which I love. But I guess my final question is how can people follow you more, get in touch, find out when you're launching these other 2 businesses and keeping the loop? Yeah.
So I really need to get better at the personal branding side of things because, I'm like, I'm not really that active on social media. I'm old school. You can find me on Facebook. So look up rayblakeney.com. Look for somebody sword fighting. That's what I do for my spare time for fun. If you find any other Ray Blakney who's not sword fighting, that's not me. Otherwise, if you want to get in touch with me, I run transparent businesses. So you go to livelingua.com, go to the staff page. My email is right there. You go to, you'll see my photo. You click on that. Here's my email. It goes directly to me. Or right now, since I'm bootstrapping, you can go to Podcast Hawk, the animal, HAWK.com, and go to the contact us page because I am the CTO, CEO, and customer support. So you just go in there and have a call. You go to the contact page and hit send, and that email actually.
If you ever want to chat with Ray, that's how to do it.
Fill out the contact form. I'll answer it. I love, like you said, Steven, I love talking about business. This is my sport. So just hit me up. I'd love to chat.
Perfect. Ray, like I said, thank you so much for coming on Founders 365. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so grateful for your time.
Thanks, Steven.
Thanks everyone else for listening and watching. This has been Founders 365.